Welcome to Between Two Pastries, a not-so-typical nutrition podcast. Nicole and Annie are licensed and registered dietitians. Join them as they discuss hot nutrition topics, challenge popular beliefs, and have a blast doing it. Here are your hosts, Nicole and Annie.
All right, welcome to Between Two Pastries. This is Nicole.
Hey everyone, it's Annie. Guess we're starting.
Yeah, we're just getting started here. So we kind of had a listener question in regards to fats. And this individual just wanted us to discuss kind of each category a little bit and just elaborate a little bit more on when to choose which ones, how to choose, what's the difference between them all, and how can we all live happily ever after with them all in our diets, I think is really what it comes down to. So
fat is something that, let's do a little history lesson here. Fat is something that through, the 50s and 60s, 70s was totally acceptable. Butter was something that you used to cook with, Crisco, oil. I remember, you'd have a large sandwich, I think, in certain parts of the U.S.
Oh, yeah. My dad had that, actually, because he grew up on a farm.
Yeah, and then the 80s and 90s was the whole, let's remove fat from everything and you can eat whatever you want or eat as much of whatever you want then, as long as it didn't have fat. So we throughout history have seen these trends with micro and macronutrients where whatever the trend is in quote unquote diet, that's what's got the bad rap. And at that time, fat had the bad rap. And what also was occurring more and more at that time was an increase in weight stigma. So you had a lot of the beauty and health industry coming out with thin is better, a Marilyn Monroe look where you've got hips and breasts and some fat to your body. Now in the 80s and 90s, the ultra thin movement really hit home, especially in the United States. So the whole no fat thing became super popular, and I can eat a loaf of bread as long as it doesn't have fat in it. And there was this whole, I think around that same time is when the Mediterranean diet and DASH diet and, really heart healthy movement started as well, more so in the 90s. With, our cardiac diets became more popular outside of a hospital. That's a little history lesson. And then I think, in the early 2000s, you started seeing this movement of, there's different types of fats. Saturated is quote unquote bad, and all the other ones are good. And then you saw trans fats being changed on the label. And I think there's a lot of confusion around fat because it is such a broad word, and it also has a negative connotation to it because of BMI and weight. So you hear the word fat and that already is ooh, I don't want to be fat. I don't want to eat fat because it makes me fat, and everything is fat that goes into it. And it's really disappointing because fat should really be part of everyone's diet.
Right, and fat needs to be part of everyone's diet, and I think that that's kind of what we want to talk about here in general. So we need fat because we need to absorb fat-soluble vitamins. And that's kind of another thing that we're finding, too, is that when individuals remove that from their diet, they're not absorbing vitamin D, which is huge. It's huge for immunity, it's huge for your brain health and your mood, it's huge for your bones, it's huge for everything. And it's huge for your microbiome as well. So we have to make sure then that we are having fat, and preferably at every meal.
Every meal. And not 5 grams in your lean cuisine.
Right.
You have to eat fat.
Right. And I think that's kind of the next point. The 5 grams in the lean cuisine may not even be either enough or when we want to make sure that we have a balance of different types. And it's because we need them all for different things.
And I venture to guess people are on the edge of their seats right now waiting for us to say how many grams of fat they should have within a meal.
Everybody's going to be different.
Everyone's different. You're not going to get that from us. You need to eat fat. And if you're thinking, oh, okay, so 10 grams. It might be in upwards of 30 grams in a meal, and it might be 10 grams in another meal. Every sitting could be different.
It's just different.
To me, I always think of it with patients and clients, what makes sense? If you're having a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with, a piece of fruit and yogurt, and you're going to probably be in that 12 to 18 range.
Sure.
And if you're having it's dinner time and you guys are getting pizza, it's going to be higher. Right. That's just how it works. Like, you want that up and down variety and stuff. So numbers, we're not even going to go there. But I also want to say, because you were talking about vitamin D, and, fat is super important for fat-soluble vitamins.
That we can't absorb without it.
Yeah, we can't absorb it without it.
Bottom line.
Yeah.
We have to have them in there.
And you can't supplement and still think you're going to be able to absorb it. Like, that's an easy way out, and B, it doesn't work.
No. It still won't work if you still are not taking in fat to support it, because the only way that can be absorbed is it because it attaches to the fat, and the fat takes it into the cell to be absorbed.
Right.
Otherwise, you're actually missing out. That's really important for people to understand, that even if they're taking a multi and there's vitamin D and or vitamin K and vitamin A in there, if you're not having fat with that meal, it's not going where it needs to go.
Right.
Essentially.
Right.
So the different types of fats, I think, are what's important too, and knowing that you want a variety of them.
Fat is so needed for protection of your organs, your abdominal section. So many people get so upset about what their abdominal section looks like, and I don't think anyone really appreciates what fat is doing for them around their organs and protection, and around the brain, in the brain, all of those types of things. Like, it's super, super important at our joints in particular sometimes, with just, fluids and fats and all of that. So anywho, let's talk about the types. So let's start with the short word, trans. That's the short word. So to get longer from there.
So trans fats have been a buzzword last several years. I think they have technically taken them out of the food chain, if you will. However, what people don't understand is that they've quote unquote banned trans fats. However, it's important that people understand that trans fats are found in hydrogenated oils.
Correct.
And so these are, chemically derived oils, basically. They're really used for like preservatives, and they also give a texture to certain foods that we're used to.
A great texture.
So I think what's important for people to understand is that when they are reading a label and they see hydrogenated oil or hydrogenated fat of some sort, partially hydrogenated, however you want to look at it, that there's still going to be trans fats in there.
Correct.
Why, and this is where it can get tricky, if there isn't a particular amount per serving, they can say there's no trans fats in there.
Right.
And that's why they can still use hydrogenated oil without violating the ban on trans fats, if that makes sense. So I think it's just important to, again, be aware of that in Oreos is kind of a big one with that. So that if you have a serving of Oreos, you're not going to get the amount of trans that you're not supposed to have, but if you have 3 servings of Oreos, you get some trans fat. The other thing that we just have to say about this one is that if you do have 3 servings of Oreos, again, we don't need to freak out that we've had probably more trans fats. It's a matter of what we're doing over time and time again.
Right.
Is really
balance.
What it is. It's the frequency of what we're putting in our body that always gives us a result, period. It's just how it is. It's the exposure.
Right.
So that's first and foremost. I think the second one we could probably talk about is the saturated
fat. Yeah.
And so again, if you're a vegan, you're not getting any saturated fat, and you actually need saturated fat. That is actually what what surrounds kind of, we need cholesterol in a sense.
Yes.
And so saturated fat will have some of that cholesterol to it.
Let's just make a point really quick, because this is something that people don't know about cholesterol, because I do think they try to eliminate it. You need cholesterol, or your body will produce it for you, and it'll
that's
produce
when it becomes
too
a problem.
much for you.
Yes, that's the thing.
So, like, you might be like, oh, I eat so healthy, and my cholesterol's so high. Well, because you're eating, you're not getting unsaturated fat.
Right. There, again, right.
I know it's a catch-22.
There's just such a.
If you stop following diets and you just put yourself in balance,
yeah, I know.
I have a saturated fat every day. But it's,
sure.
I mean, you kind of think about it, like, if I butter a roll at lunch, I'm generally not buttering a roll at dinner.
Yeah,
or
exactly. And there's
you don't
your
have
balance.
to pre-plan. You just have to think, like,
yeah.
what do I really need in this moment? What completes this meal? Right. And saturated fats are going to include things like butter, lard.
Any of the fat that you might eat, like in a meat, is essentially what you're looking at. And that's the fat that we need some of, but we need the least of.
Yeah, we
just don't require a whole lot of it, but it's still beneficial for us.
It might be
that's important.
A couple foods that we eat in a day.
Yeah.
You know, and most foods have a reasonable amount. I mean, it's not astronomical in most foods, I would say, but depends on how it comes.
And then the other ones that can be, considered, I guess, really helpful as well to heart health, and even now we're getting into like helpful for like the joints and I hate to throw in the word inflammation, but to kind of counteract that would be like your poly and your mono unsaturated fats, like your olive oils and your canola oil, and it could be like your walnut, your cold pressed walnut oil or flax oil, or
lots of oils
like that. So just the different plant based oils that you can get, preferably cold pressed.
Yeah, I mean the oils that I do think we should mention, palm oil and coconut oil are the two that I absolutely despise and I think should go to the.
And those are also saturated fats, but those are actually
worse.
Those are worse on your body than having a steak.
Yes,
and eating all of the marbling that goes with it. You know what I mean?
Oh, yes. That's something that always kills me with my Skippy peanut butter is there's palm oil in it. And I'm like, it's killing the orangutans. That's what I think about. It makes me really upset. Right. I know. There's other things that go into that, but it hurts my body. But it's like, that's okay as long as the orangutans are okay.
I know. Save all the animals.
Save all the animals.
I love the animals.
But, okay, so those are my two beefs on oils. But oils in general, I mean, grapeseed oil. I mean, there's lots of oils that are wonderful to whether you make a salad dressing with it, or you coat your veggies in it and roast them, or you use it on, I don't know, lots of different things.
I think the idea is just to make sure you're having a fat at every meal. Whether that's going to come from, a peanut butter or an almond butter, or if it's going to come from an added oil, or if it's going to come from a butter.
It's in your steak or your burger or whatever.
But just making sure that you definitely have some.
Right.
And some of these other oils that are a little bit more expensive, like walnut oil, actually is, first of all, it tastes incredible, but you can't heat it. So there's some oils that you can't, like you can't heat flax oil, you can't heat walnut oil.
So by like heating, like if you want to fry something up,
in cooking, you have to just add those to a salad. What's important to understand is that when you're talking about some of the vegetable oils, like an olive oil, that you just don't want to provide it a lot of heat for a very long period of time. It's one thing if you're going to do a quick stir fry,
heat it,
and you keep the stuff moving.
Correct.
But if you're going to kind of just let it sit in the pan and then heat for a really long time on super high heat,
that's
changes
gross.
It'll change the integrity of the actual oil, and then it becomes not as beneficial for you too, and that too can alter the taste as well. So just sort of keep that in mind.
Sometimes I'll make homemade chips, and olive oil I would never use. It's generally a basic vegetable oil or canola oil
because it can stand heat a little bit better too.
And I think people need to realize that. Like I often see McDonald's is using X oils or this oil, or people, oh, that's so terrible.
Yeah,
and you're just like, but there's reasons why some oils are used and some oils are not. It has nothing to do with your health at all.
Correct.
It has to do with the integrity of the food item and the integrity of the oil, and then what happens when you put it in your body, and what there's reasons behind this.
Right. And so you want, we're talking about French fries, like you need one that's going to have a higher smoke point.
Correct.
Because like Annie was just saying, like not only is that going to be better for when you're cooking, but your body can actually, you're not hurting, but this awful thing for your body.
Right.
Again.
For the sake of being a mono or polyunsaturated
yes, for the sake of being correct.
Quote unquote healthy.
Correct. And there's times where you want certain things to be a particular way.
Right. And that's where I think we've lost it on so many levels of nutrition, but fat in particular, because I still think so many people in society are holding on to that belief system from the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Lower fat equals healthier.
Yeah.
And and then you have, of course, the movement where fat is the only thing we'll eat, but it's got to be mono and poly, and it's just like
we want a balance of everything. I think that's just essentially what we're trying to say in general, and that will also help as far as inflammation. And without going down the inflammation road, inflammation has so much to do with collectively what you're consuming, again, day in and day out.
And you just think of all the people who are, don't eat fat, and then you're like, your brain, your organs,
Well, and speaking of brain too, I mean, we need to talk about omega-3 fatty acids too, just because of the fact that we have such an imbalance in our country in particular. It's so difficult to get omega-3s, and if we're going to supplement with any fat, I honestly am a big supporter of we've got to get our omega-3s in any way we can. And the issue, I think, is that we have such limited sources of omega-3s.
We do.
If you're not a huge fan of fish, or if you're allergic to it, or if you're vegan or something, we have to find other ways. And we can get omega-3s from our walnuts, but there's this conversion, so we don't get quite as much as what we need in a course of a day. And so, inflammation can happen because we have this huge imbalance of omega-3 to other fats that we're taking in a day. And ideally, in order to have less inflammation in our body, we want to be taking in way more omega-3s than we are any other fat. And in our country, it's actually flipped.
Correct.
And that's why this country struggles with more disease states that are inflammatory based in general.
Right.
Because that imbalance is so prevalent.
Based on location, I've seen, especially working in school food service, like based on location of being at the coasts, you can see a little bit more of that on menus.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Versus in the Midwest, you might see a fish stick, and that's that's as far as it goes, because our access and pricing is just so different. So I mean, it goes so much further, and stuff. But
so if we're talking about omega-3s, though, again, and you don't like walnuts, or I mean, again, let's just be honest, you're not.
It's a lot of walnut.
I would not tell anybody to get all their omega-3s from walnuts, because the conversion is so minimal, and you'd have to consume so many, and it just doesn't make any sense after. And now you've created another imbalance.
Correct.
You see what I mean? So it's like we really probably do need to look at supplementing some omega-3s at some point. And, studies have shown us many, many times, too, that it takes about 3,000 units of omega-3s that can really start affecting, like your triglycerides, if you have triglyceride issues.
Yep.
And you can go up to 5,000 as long as you're not on, like, a warfarin or anything like that, because omegas can thin your blood a little bit. So it's just kind of being familiar with that. So looking at how you can make your omegas more top-heavy, if you will, in your daily diet of what you're consuming. Where can you add them in? And if you can get them from some food sources in addition to supplementation, as long as you're consistent with that day in and day out, you're going to start having some really nice potential changes within your own body structure. And again, it could come through your lipid panels coming out better. You might have, your joints might start feeling better. Things just might start feeling better. I'm not going to guarantee anything, but I'm just saying the more consistent you can be with this balance for yourself, the better.
You might think more clearly.
You might think more clearly. And from some of our other pods we've talked about, people are really interested in thinking more clearly. And we do need to look at your intake.
Yeah.
And why.
Right.
So again, take a peek at what your personal fat balance is in the course of the day. And again, not so much of maybe how much you're consuming, but where are your sources coming from that you are choosing to take in, and hoping that you are consuming some and enough at every meal, because we have to, again, our pod wasn't really the specifics on on not eating fat, or why you do want to eat fat as much, though, is you absolutely positively need it
to survive.
And you'll feel better with it. It's just a matter of making sure you have all the balances that go with it.
Right.
And the different types of it.
And that's just it. I mean, don't feel overwhelmed in what we're saying. Because I bet a lot of people are going to be like, okay, am I eating enough fat? And now I'm going to log, and now I'm going to, like, no.
You're probably,
Take a step back.
Right.
And just, do I eat fat? Am I afraid of fat?
Sure.
Like, just even starting with that basic question, do I feel like my fats are out of balance? And it's not a day-to-day thing. Like, we have to look at history and future of eating. Like, not that we're planning, but that it's like, how do I eat in a given week or a month?
Yeah, we still have to be aware of what we're doing.
Yeah, like,
we have to be cognizant of what we're choosing on a daily basis. It's not a matter of judging it. It's just a matter of, hey, are all my checks and balances there?
Exactly.
Do I have my fat at this meal? Where's my protein at this meal? How about my, carbohydrate? Where am I getting that from?
And
that's
if
all we're saying.
You're at a pasta bar, and so you're not getting enough protein in that meal, let's say. The next meal has it, like that it's, like, or if you go to a steak dinner and you're not getting your carbohydrate there, you're in it's not an everyday thing. So, there's peaks and valleys to this. And same with just fat. Like, don't be overwhelmed with needing to eat it, or that there's 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever different kinds and ways and all the numbers, and just
get a variety and do it daily.
French fries, it's avocado.
Right. And try to focus a lot on omega-3s.
Yeah.
Only because of the fact that we're not getting enough of those. So those you might have to pay more attention to.
Right.
Is making sure they're actually entering your body at this point.
Right. And just remember, too, we're talking about omega-3s.
Yeah, omega-3s.
Not omega-6s.
Omega-6s and 9s are the ones we get enough of. And just
plenty of
one little case in point there, and again, this came from another physician where they had told one of my clients to take a particular supplement in, and she said, "Well, this is to get my omegas in," and I said, "Ooh," I'm like, no, this has an omega-3, 6, and a 9.
No.
It's like no, you're already taking way too many 6s and 9s. All you need is the 3s. Because you're already taking in enough of the 6s and 9s, so you'll have that balance. But it's the 3s that is very necessary that we're getting enough of.
What's 3 in? Let's talk about that really quick.
Well, so we sort of mentioned before, omega-3s are in your walnuts, but they're just not high enough. You also get your 6s and 9s in your So your fatty fish, so your orange roughies, salmon, trout is a really big one.
Oh, sardines.
Sardines can be too.
Yeah.
So again, if you don't like those, that's what I'm saying. It's like, okay, what's going to be your next best, right?
Don't assume it's all fish.
And you'll get it from like your flax meal. I won't say flax seed because you got to ground the flax seed in order to actually absorb anything from it. So flax meal.
Yeah.
But you can't, again, flax meal, you can't consume enough of it.
Right.
So it's still a matter of where are you going to get that in.
Yeah.
I do have clients who will take shots of flax oil in a day.
Woo.
They are my hardcore tough clients, but they feel amazing from it.
I bet they do.
To the point where like their gout went away because
they
were,
no, it will.
But that's the thing. Like they were just consistent with it, and they have good results.
Plug your
and now
nose.
they don't want to give that up at all.
Right.
So they put it in smoothies where you don't actually notice it. Yeah, you don't really notice it in a smoothie, which is nice.
Well, I know I've used different omega-3 capsules.
Yeah.
That, honestly, I think people usually, the one concern I hear is, is it going to taste fishy?
Yeah, and I guess, not all of them do, and some of them come back a little bit more, but I also feel like it is what it is. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's just like
Then learn to like salmon. I don't know what to tell you.
You're going to have to take the goods with the bads when you're making different choices in your...
Yeah, I know.
We sort of have to just accept that certain things are just going to be how they are.
Right, totally.
But, yeah, we've said enough for now. I'll still have to edit it.
I know.
All right, guys, signing off. Bye.
Have questions you want to hear discussed on the show? Find us on Facebook or visit betweentwopastries.com and drop us a line. Want to support the show? Find us on Patreon for exclusive content. If you love the show, find us on iTunes or your favorite podcast platform. Hit the subscribe button and leave us a review.